And yeah, so let's get started. This is so exciting. So this is my first time doing this, yeah. Okay. Okay, so this we don't really need to worry about. So this all that I think about covering all the different areas in the syllabus. Okay, cool. So to start off, I want us to try to think about what a public good is, right? So I'm sure you have heard of the term public good before somewhere, but why don't we start off with a question? So we've got three options here. A police car. B, apples found in your backyard. 3, the Loch Ness Monster. So which of the following do you think is a public good? Yeah. Oh, hi. Afternoon, Patrick. Thanks for following us. Yeah, so which of the following do you think is a public good? So I'll give you like 30 seconds to think about it. If you're not sure, just take a guess. And then once you are ready, you can type in the chat, just say 1 or 2 or 3. And then we'll see if any of you have got or guessed the correct answer. Yeah. So I'll give you maybe 5 more seconds. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm gonna tell you then. Okay, so the answer is not a police car. And the answer is actually the Loch Ness Monster. So it is actually quite counterintuitive, but you'll see why once we get into the definition of a public good. So if we go ahead. Okay, so what is a public good? Yeah. A public good has 2 characteristics. One of which is that it does not reduce when used. So, for example, if you think of like a public bench in the park, when you sit on it, it doesn't usually decrease or disappear, right? You can't like consume the public bench. So in that sense, the quantity of the good does not decrease when it is used. And secondly, anyone can access a public good. And by anyone, I mean like you'll be able to access a public good without paying or without using any money as well. So if we think about street light, we don't need to pay for street light, and it's just there for our use when you're driving. I'm not sure if any of you have your driver's license yet, but street light, we don't really need to pay for it. So that's why it is what we call non-excludable. Yeah. So let me just take out my pen here. Yeah. Okay. So it is non-excludable. Yeah. So if we go back to the previous slide, now we can think about each of these things, right? Number 1, does it reduce in quantity when we use it? And secondly, can anybody use it? So if we look at the police car option, sure, it does not reduce in quantity when we use it, but can anybody use it? We can't, right? So it's only for like the police force. So in a sense, we would call this as excludable, yeah? Excludable. Yeah. So because it is excludable and not everyone like us can just jump into a police car and use it, then it wouldn't be a public good. And similarly, apples found in your backyard, not anyone can enter your backyard, right? So again, it's excludable. And also, it reduces in quantity when we eat the apples. So it's what we call rivalrous, yeah. So apples, not good, yeah. Not a public good. Excludable and rivalrous. And then finally, for the Loch Ness Monster, it actually isn't excludable. So we'll put non-excludable. The reason for that is because if you do encounter the Loch Ness Monster, it won't reduce in quantity, right? Anyone can still go and see the Loch Ness Monster after you've encountered it, so it would still be there. And also, it's non-rivalrous. So non-rivalrous just means that it does not reduce in quantity when you consume the good. And in this case, when you see the Loch Ness Monster, is still going to be there, right? It's not going to reduce in quantity. You're not catching it and eating the Loch Ness Monster. So, yeah, that's why the Loch Ness Monster in this case would be the public good. Yeah. So I guess the important point here I want to make is that a public good is different from public ownership. Yeah. So even if the government owns something, it does not mean that it's a public good in economics. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So I'll just keep going on, and then if you guys have any questions, there's kind of like, you can just pop it in the chat, and also you can like ask any questions on the break as well. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead. Okay, so we mentioned about public goods and private goods. So, okay, but what if a good is both excludable and rivalrous? So if we go back here, if we use a pointer. So if a good is rivalrous and excludable, so that means if it can be used up and certain people cannot use it, then as a result, it is what we call a private good. Yeah. So we think about like computers, or we think about eggs in your fridge or milk in your fridge. When you drink it, it's gone. So when you drink it, it reduces the possibility of others being able to do so, being able to drink that milk, right? So in that case, that good is rivalrous. So milk in your fridge is a private good because it's rivalrous, and also it's excludable because other people can just go into your house and drink your milk. Or at least we wouldn't want them to, right? Okay, so I'm not sure if you guys are studying maths or not, but in the next diagram, you'll see a Venn diagram. So if you're studying maths, you'll be familiar with this, but if you're not, then don't worry about it. So it's kind of like for the maths people here. So as you can see in this diagram, what it's showing is if it is both excludable and rivalrous, then it's a private good. If it is non-excludable and non-rivalrous, it's a public good. But if it is a little bit of both, so if it is excludable but not rivalrous, or the other way around, we call it a quasi-public good. Yeah? So you'll kind of see what I mean in the next example. Okay, yeah. Quasi-public goods. Which of the following is a quasi-public good? So I'll give you 30 seconds to think about it. Oh, and also remember, the two criterias you want to think about is 1, whether it's rivalrous, or 2, whether it's excludable. Yeah? So if it is one, but not the other, then it is a quasi-public good. I'm going to give you like 10 seconds while I stare out the window. So option 1 is traffic lights. Yeah, so we see these every day. Option 2, the Great Barrier Reef. And option 3, a natural hot spring. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Are you ready for the answer? So the answer is the natural hot spring. Do I have any confused look on your faces? I can't see your faces. I guess if I'm actually in the class, then I'll be able to see your faces and whether you're confused. But anyway, so yeah, so it's option 3, a natural hot spring. Why? Because number 1, it is non-excludable. Yeah, so it's non-excludable because if it is a natural hot spring, anyone can just jump into the hot spring, right? And they'll be able to enjoy it and use it. However, it is rivalrous. So it's non-excludable, but rivalrous. The reason it is rivalrous is because there's limited space in the hot spring. So the hot spring might only be able to accommodate like 10 people, right? So if there's too many people in the hot spring, then we won't be able to use it. So in this sense, it is non-excludable. That means anyone can access it, but it is rivalrous. So there's a limited number of people that can use it. And using it would reduce the possibility of other people using it. So it's rivalrous. And in this case, it would be a quasi-public good. Yeah. So it's the same as beaches, and even roads. Yeah. So for beaches, if there's too many people on the beach or in the park, then technically it's rivalrous because there's too many people and it would reduce the possibility of you using it. And similarly for roads, if there are too many cars on the road, then that's bad as well because you've got traffic congestion and you're reducing the possibility of others using it. So in this sense, both of these are quasi-public goods as well. So even though you can't not allow other people to access it, but you can reduce the possibility of other people using it. Traffic lights and the Great Barrier Reef are both normal public goods because it is both non-rivalrous and non-excludable. Yeah, so anyone can use it and you can't reduce the quantity of them such that other people can't use it. Okay, cool. So let's move on. Okay, so a lot of economics concepts, you might feel that it's not very relevant, right? Because it sounds very technical and it doesn't really relate to real life. So now we're trying to see why public goods are important. Yeah. So the thing is, these public goods, because anybody can use it and anyone can access it, it's very difficult to regain the cost of creating these goods. So in the sense, nobody is actually willing to build streetlights or nobody is actually willing to build roads because you can't get back your cost of production. So that is a very big problem in the market because if we don't actually have roads or we don't actually have streetlights, that would be quite bad, as you can imagine. So essentially, identifying public goods is important because it allows for the government to know when to step in and to provide these goods. So what do we call this phenomenon? When people aren't willing or are just using these public goods for free, like streetlight or like roads, we call it the free rider problem, right? So they aren't essentially paying to build these streetlights or roads, but they would use these goods and they would be what we call a free rider, like that guy there. So I'm not sure if you guys have played Line Rider before, but yeah, that's from there. Okay, sure. So that's the free rider problem. And that's an important concept to know, yeah. Okay, so it's like a group project where you do no work, but then you try to reap the fruits of your teammates' labor. So if you just do nothing and then you get an A in a group project or in a teamwork project, then you would be what we call free riding. Yeah? So you're not paying for it, but you can still use the good. Okay, so like I previously said, if it's left to the private market, the street lamps won't be built because you can't make money or profit from the street lamps since anyone can just use it and they don't need to pay you to use it. So because of that phenomenon, we have what we call a missing market. Yeah. So this is what we call a missing market, and missing markets are bad because we want that good or we want something that is useful for us but it's not produced. So that's what we call a missing market. And whenever there's a missing market, there would be what we call a market failure because there isn't an incentive to produce the good in the market and we can't use it. So that would mean there's a loss of welfare. So welfare you can just think of as like utility in society. So because some of us has lost utility, essentially we are having less welfare because nobody is like producing streetlights and everyone is driving in the dark, which isn't very nice. And we've got like more road accidents and all that. Okay, cool. Next. Does anyone here download illegal software? Don't tell me. And don't say it in the chat as well. Don't spam in the chat and say that you're downloading illegal software. But anyway, so this actually relates to privacy. Yeah. So everyone likes free stuff, right? And everyone likes to free ride. And when the paid digital software, like Microsoft Word or Windows, for example, or some games and films that you like watching, I don't know, Avengers or something like that, and if you are able to download it for free on pirated websites, then essentially, so say Avengers, you're making what is supposedly a private good into a public good. Because normally, the Avengers film, you can only watch it in the cinema, right? But if you're able to download it for free online, that means anyone can access it, so it's non-excludable. And also, watching the film won't reduce the quantity available, right? So it's also non-rivalrous. So the point here is that piracy actually makes digital software, games, and applications become a public good. Yeah. So you can see whether a good is private or public can change because of technology. So it's important to note that point. Okay, I see there's a question here, but I will get back to it later during the break. And then what problem may stop game companies from producing? So yeah, you've guessed right. The free rider problem, right, may stop game companies from producing, leading to missing markets and market failure. Yeah. So so the question asked in the chat is, in a market economy, there's no provision of public goods. Yes, that is correct. So remember, there are three types of economies in the world, right? So there's a free market economy. So in that case, it's all determined by market forces. And then there's the command economy, where the government controls everything. So like in a communist or a planned economy. And then there's the mixed economy. Yeah. So if you are in a free market economy, there won't be any public goods because of missing markets. Yeah. So nobody has any incentive to build like street lamps or public benches or public parks. Yeah. So, but normally, essentially for like 99% of the economies in the world, we are having a mixed economy. So that means there are some types of government intervention. So there is a role for government to play in the mixed economy. Yeah. So in that sense, the government would step in to provide these missing market goods. Okay, so if we go back to free riding, so essentially for all of these digital software, when you can download them for free and you can access them for free and you don't reduce the quantity of them, they would become public goods, yeah, due to the lack of copyright regulation. Okay, so kind of like what we've covered here again. What can the government do? The government can either, when there's a missing market, the government can provide the public good directly. So that's why the government helps build roads and street lamps and all of that stuff. And actually, where does the money come from for the government? They just collect the money through taxes, right? So essentially, they're just using our money to pay for the public goods, for the benefit of the public. So that's kind of like how the system works. Yeah. And essentially, this would help make the free riders pay, right? Because the free riders must pay taxes, and as a result, the taxes will be used to fund the public goods. And the government can either build the roads themselves, or they can use the money to buy the services of a private company to help build the roads. So the government might pay a construction company to help build the roads. Yeah. Okay, second option. So this option kind of helps with the missing markets problem, right? And then the second solution kind of helps with the piracy problem, right? Or the technological change, yeah. So the government can use regulation and try to control the accessibility of these goods to make them excludable again. So for example, if the government passes the copyright law, then downloading pirated goods or pirated software is illegal, then as a result, we're excluding people such that they can't access it apart unless they pay for it. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go into that a bit more later. Okay, so now here for some news examples that are related to public goods. So you can see here, Europe can take a bigger role in providing public goods. The EU should invest more. So recently, I'm not sure if you've heard, but the EU can no longer rely to the US for its defense. So the United States has been cutting the amount of soldiers that are being stationed in Germany, and in order to kind of help save money for the US government. Yeah. So as a result, we can see that Europe, in this case, might need to increase their budget for defense, which essentially is a public good. Yeah. And of course, defense is a public good because it's, again, non-rivalrous. So defending one person in your country won't that mean that you can't defend another. And also, it is non-excludable because everyone in the country would benefit from the national defense. So defense would be a public good. And similarly for cyber attacks, they'll be able to defend all of that. So that's that. This, I'm not sure if any of you watch anime. So this anime site has been taken down as Japan threatens piracy law. Internet mourns end of childhood. So yeah, when you establish new laws or ensure that the intellectual property rights are protected, or if you monitor and control the viewership or whether people are able to download these illegal software and films, then as a result, again, you're excluding some people to be able to access these goods. So if you think of like Netflix or Apple TV, right? Essentially you are excluding people because you need to pay for an Netflix subscription and you need to pay for an Apple TV before you can access that content. So essentially, you are changing the nature of those shows from a public good, which was accessible by piracy, into a private good. Because now we need to pay in order to access those shows. So again, this kind of relates to technological change. Will broadband become a public good? Does anyone here like free internet? I guess everyone here likes free internet, right? So I've heard of like, I've seen a comic or something saying that if the person dies, what they would do is that they would install a free Wi-Fi at their gravestone so that people would kind of like visit him. But that's a bit somber. But anyway, so Google is trying to provide free internet to parts of the world using these kind of balloon things. So the company is called Loon. If you're interested, you can kind of look more into it. And I mean, this kind of got cancelled. Labour was thinking of providing free broadband if they won the election, but that didn't happen. Yeah. Okay. So another important concept we want to understand for public goods is something what we call the tragedy of the commons. Yeah. So what is tragedy of the commons? Let me tell you a story. So if you are a farmer, right, and you've got cows, so in order to take care of the cows, you need to take them to what? You need to take them to a green field where it's full of grass, and then they can, like, I don't know, eat the grass here, right? But if your land is already quite dry and quite barren, so if there's no grass on your land, so only like a few grass on your land, then what you can do as a farmer is that you can go to the land where you don't own, and then you have the cows eat all the grass on the land that you don't own. Because if you do that, then you'd be able to, feed your cows, but also it won't ruin your own land, right? So as a result, we can see for these public land with lots of grass on it, everyone would be trying to get their cows and their animals here. And then as a result, the land is going to become quite barren, right? So this is what we call tragedy of the commons. If everyone just abuses the public land or things that are publicly owned, then essentially it would die out. Yeah. And of course, that's not very good for the public, right? So, and this concept applies to all the other different natural habitats as well. So we've got land here, and then we've got coral reefs here, and we've got overfishing as well. So because nobody owns like fishes in the sea where it's out of the country's boundaries, then everyone can overfish, and there's kind of like no consequence for it. Yeah. So most of this is due to a lack of property rights, and ownership. Yeah. So because nobody owns these pieces of land, everyone is just going to abuse it. And since nobody owns these coral reefs, we're just going to keep polluting them until they die. So all of these coral reefs turned white. They aren't supposed to be white. So they became white because of global warming and the increase in the sea temperature. Yeah. So that's tragedy of the commons. Because anyone can access these public goods, they're just going to abuse them, and they can try to get value out of them without paying anything. So another example, if you just think of like public toilets or shared kitchens, when you guys go to uni, you're going to get like shared kitchens, and they're going to be like extremely dirty or shared toilets. The reason being is because it's shared, right? Nobody wants to take the responsibility of cleaning it, and nobody wants to take the effort in cleaning them. And of course, since you don't own the place, so you can just like litter all over it and nobody would care. So that's kind of what we call tragedy of the commons. Okay. Next. So there's a very common example for tragedy of the commons, overfishing. So if there is overfishing, in this case, a few Chinese vessels has been overfishing in international waters, and as a result, nobody can sue them because there's no legal jurisdiction there, and there are no laws that protect overfishing in international waters. So as a result, there might be tragedy of the commons because these natural resources or public goods that are accessible to everyone are not being protected. Yeah, so that's the problem with overfishing. If we've got tighter laws and regulations, like we've previously discussed, then we'll be able to protect these fish stocks from being vulnerable to overfishing. Okay, so here are just some deep sea octopuses and cuttlefish that we want to protect. The left is a flapjacked octopus, and the right is what we call a stubby squid. So it kind of looks like a stuffed animal, but it's not. It's actually a real thing. But yeah, at this point, we're about to go into a break. But if you guys have got any questions, do try to pop it into the chat right now about public goods. And then when we come back, we would do some questions together, and we'll kind of like test your knowledge to see what you've learned. maybe nothing. We'll see.